Hi there, it's Terry Bell here from EU Property Solutions, and thank you for joining us on the webinar, which it says there will start shortly. We're looking at particularly property values because it's a very thorny subject. Trying to establish property values generally in foreign countries is quite difficult, and in today's world with Brexit and COVID, which we mentioned there, it's making it a lot more difficult. This isn't an overly technical webinar. We're using some backdrop of research. We're trying to explain how we get to a basis on what we work on, and we work usually with negative equity. So it has relevance, but sometimes we need to make sure that we all understand what we're trying to do here. So we'll get going in a minute or so. And we've got quite a decent package here. I'm actually recording this for YouTube. You may notice this is on YouTube, and there will be a couple of breaks in there while we put in a couple of other bits in terms of what we use personally ourselves going forward in marketing. There's also going to be a little bit about us, just so you get understanding who and what we are, rather than being a completely faceless entity, and you'll understand hopefully that we're here forever. We're massively invested in what we do for our clients, and we want to make sure that you understand a little bit about us. We're always in for the long run. And another side of our business, for instance, we've got clients that have been unfortunately waiting for 8 years to get a resolution. Not their fault, not our fault, very typically the bank's fault. So it just gives a little bit of a backdrop to us. So we'll get going here, if that's okay, as we fast approach 6 o'clock here on Thursday evening. Dinner's got to be ready. So we're talking about property values here in Spain and Cyprus. And the areas we're going to cover are detailed after I talk about our lovely book. This is Stanley, one of our great consultants, Stanley. This is a book that if you haven't already got, you'll get it in an electronic form. And if you want the hard copy, as they say, they just email us there at hello@EU Property Solutions, and we'll get you a hard copy of that book. And that's our general perception of what's gone on in terms of the market. A little bit of history. We don't try not to labour on that too much. More solutions-led, but it gives a backdrop to everybody as to where we are at the minute. If you had the misfortune to buy a property that didn't work out, usually pre-2008. So if you want a copy of that, we'll get that to you. So going on to the mainstay of what we're going to discuss today, these are the areas we've broken it down to, and there's a little about selling costs, because sometimes they can be, in Spain, they're pretty horrific. And it's giving people the backdrop and sort of setting off a bit of hope value there, we call one, versus reality. And that's what it's about. But as ever, we must end on the fact that we will find solutions for all cases that we take on board. And that can involve legal arguments, that can involve jurisdictional arguments and or legal arguments. So we're going to go in through this. So what we're looking at is the Spanish property market. We did a small survey there. Surveys and research we found out pretty slanted to whoever's making them. Basically create an argument for their own existence. We talk about the two main markets for us in this instance are MURCIA and Costa del Sol. We go through the selling costs of Spain, and we mentioned briefly on Cyprus. We can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is the effect of COVID and Brexit on prices, and we have a discount. Not very scientific, but a discount we apply if you have to sell in today's world. Separate property values, which is like make up a number because we refer to it as the wild, wild west there. We tell you about our newsletter and a little bit about what we do, just so you understand that we're human beings as well, based here in England, but use our legal teams in Spain and Cyprus particularly. A bit about value, we'll give an example where the gentleman and lady came to us and they thought they had a small problem. It's quite a big problem. We still resolved it, but it was a big problem. And then we're giving you a little backdrop as to how we work. And again, most of this is explained in the book. So we'll crack on here, if that's okay with everybody, and we'll go in first to Spanish property market. The Spanish property market is particularly difficult to call at the minute because there are so many moving parts, and also we're still in the midst of COVID. So this video may not age that well because we get massive changes. As is, it would appear that Spain and Britain have it gripped, we'll call it, in terms of vaccination. So hopefully we're coming at it as we go through this. But Spain has many different property markets, as do most countries, with that said, especially tourist destinations. So you've got the overall situation in Spain, which, if taken as is, and because of the way the world is, it's okay because there's a lot of money, there's a lot of availability of mortgages, etc., etc. So overall, the market's pretty buoyant. But when you start to break that down, it's like anywhere. If we decide to talk about one-bed flats in a deprived area in England, that obviously isn't comparable to a nice 5-bed detached house, say, within the M25 value rise. So a lot of moving parts. One of the main things that lap over in terms of what we do, where you've got typically holiday homeowners and some expats, is the prices have now come to a certain level where they're attracting the interest of Spanish nationals, which is quite healthy. I'm not sure if that's the right phrase. It's almost they deem it to have reached the bottom. They're the guys in the know. So, for instance, if we're doing some work south of Estepona, people that work in Gibraltar will buy in that area because it's 40 minutes down the road, whereas it's very, very expensive to live in the tax haven that's Gibraltar. Then you've got the 2012 plus market. So basically, the crash happened in 2008. No noise, everyone's screaming. Then there was a re-entry into the market by some of the big developers there in terms of 2012 because another market was created and developed. And to all intents and purposes, that wasn't mass building, that was bespoke building, quality developments, to put it in very fine terms. And then also we've got pre-2009, where we find most of our work in terms of what we do. And we deal with negative equity situations. So we've got a handle on the Spanish property market. We never purport to know everything because, again, within the market, we've got that split and those niches. So in preparation for this delivery, the font of all knowledge in Spain, particularly on the holiday market side, is Mark Stucklin and his brilliant website, Spanish Property Insights. And Mark has commented that since, at this moment in time, because of COVID, sales volume is down 16% when compared to 2019, and when compared to 2018, i.e. 2 periods prior to COVID, is 21% lower. Excuse me. So the volume, it doesn't actually sort of add any multiple effect, if you like, on the value, but it shows that there's less demand, obviously, so that will affect price, end of. And I think those figures will be fairly conservative given the many sort of effects on travel of COVID. And also people's long-term perception of what is important to them. We've all had a bit of a ready reckoner with this. You can't plan anything long-term. I have reason to go to Spain quite regularly, and any number of flights have basically gone because COVID's popped up, gone away, come back, this restriction, that restriction, etc., etc. So there are quite a few other effects. That's in sales volume in gross terms, so we get that. Interestingly, so far, Mark comments that Brexit, he doesn't think, has yet had an effect on the sales volume of properties in Spain, but that does have the complex background, if you like, of COVID-19, the effect of that there. And as we refer to later, Brexit's going to be death by 1,000 cuts, how it actually does follow through. So it's tricky enough to pitch it. The market's not in a great place. It's similar to 2010, say, when the fact, if you were looking to sell or had to sell, it attracts another type of buyer, which are essentially sharks looking for real bargains. They're nearly hoping that you have to sell so badly that you will literally give it away if need be. Different type of buyer, and there's a bit of that going on. And some people have to sell for whatever purposes. We had something, it was part of some impractical solicitor had set it up in a divorce agreement that it was going to be sold by the end of 2021. So consequently, the property is going away for nothing. So it's a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different types of markets. And with the research findings, we did our little sample here, which we're going to talk you through. People kindly contributed so generously with their time and answered just a couple of simple questions. But different agendas give different findings. And there was even an article in the Financial Times there about Marbella talking of £10 million apartments versus one-bed apartments that you can't give away. And it was an article, the FT is usually on point, but in this instance, we're trying to work out what it really wanted to say. Whereas estate agents will say, yes, the market's flying, it's great, and everything else. We don't think that is the case when you see the weather pictures in the window. But it's whatever your argument is. We asked a couple of simple questions and just sought responses, and we're just going to relay those bits to you now, just as we go on a bit here. So this was in Spain, and 90% of the participants worked in the property market in Spain. The main response was COSTA del Sol, but that's where you get more movement and fluidity in the market, if you like. We're going to come back to the MURCIA area in a minute as under a separate sort of mini screen here. Estate agents are quite obviously seeing a fall of volume, excuse me, and they think that the market has suffered. That was a general thing we're getting back. There was so we asked the question, when do you think it returned to normal? And the general response was not for a while. So it's that non-committal thing, you know. We go out on a limb slightly. I'm sure some of these things will bite our backside later down the track when we project things and say this is happening, that's happening, and in fact it goes different. It would appear that there's a lot of unknowns out there. I'm sure we all agree that when you get different variants as we speak, the Delta variants out there, and so anyway, it's going to take a while. Whatever if you're 22 and it bounces back, brilliant. We love good news as well, but we're in what we do. Then we're looking at what they thought were the biggest contributors to the changes in property values. And the results are there. If you look at Brexit, they're talking 25%, 35% thought it was COVID. Then you get another 10% or so who say it's the same. And then you get my thing about if you don't make so this is generic, what we're trying to do here. And what some people have done, they've come back there and said it's other factors. So it most likely could be in respect to their development, their little area, whatever's going on. But it was just those couple of things there we thought we'd share with you. So it's very hard to get detailed research. We know what we know, and we deal with it daily. We were on with our Spanish legal team this morning, and they're starting to see things open up slightly. But you've got a country that's very scared. Most countries are scared, but Spain is particularly scared about all the effects this is going to have on them, including the banks. It doesn't make them any nicer people, but they're concerned as well where we are. So that's the Spanish overall property market. Like slightly rambling, but there's many moving and contributing factors as we go on. So MURCIA is an area we do a lot of work in, and it's particularly populated by golf resorts, which were like the old Polaris ad with Jack Nicklaus, come in, the water's great, selling the dream. But it didn't actually work like that, as we know, and particularly in that area, there's been some horrific falls in value, and it's very hard in that area to secure buyers because some of the quality of the build's not great, some of the golf courses aren't great. If you live there, I'm not trashing your dream or where you live. It's where we see horror stories every day. And so it's a general thing that we're finding here. At certain style of developments, there's an area there where it's almost like a corridor down to the sea where you've got any number of golf resorts, and simply they just will not hold their value and you will not recover. So we deal with the problems head on. We're not looking to offend anybody, but it's tough. And that was the case before COVID and Brexit. We're already finding a lot of issues down there. And with that, so prior to that, we were taking a very commercial approach in terms of what we do down there. And you've got to focus on what the net realization is going to be. So if you can sell it, you've more or less got to give it away. You've got your selling costs, you've got everything else. It's the net realization helps you establish the basis and quantity and quantum, if you like, of any problem. So that's what we do. With golf courses, it's relatively easy because usually there's quite a few properties on the market, but that doesn't give you a true valuation. And I'm going to talk through our process of how we work to get to a value. And I refer to our friends at Polaris Golf there. They had about, I think it's about 11,000 properties there, and that they will be at least 12 plus years old. And that in turn brings its own issues in terms of maintenance and everything else, and has undoubtedly an effect on the value, because sometimes the quality of the build, we've seen stuff where there's literally walls crumbling and alike, and it's not horror stories, but I'm just saying we know the lie of the land there. In fact, touch wood, with our ability to now travel. I'm due there at the end of October. So again, we'll get ourselves up to speed. We're in touch with our people on the ground there all the time, but we like to see ourselves what's going on. The COVID backstop here at least will bring paralysis, we believe, until well into 2022. Hopefully, genuinely, we hope it opens up more and more so people get the chance to travel to the places they own and or decide what they want to do with it. But as is, the market's in complete paralysis. The tourist season has effectively come to an end, although it goes on a wee bit over there. But 18 months to 2 years has gone completely out of the market in terms of time-wise, interest, etc. So if you're looking to sell, again, it goes back to the type of buyer you will attract. Now, our method of valuation is quite simple. Okay, it depends on it depends on the nature of the resort and the number of units that are for sale there. But what we typically do is say, right, we look for, because there's plenty of information out there in terms of values in, say, resorts. And what we do, we find the lowest price, but it has to be comparable. There's no point in getting the lowest price on a 1-bed flat when somebody's got a 2 or 3-bed flat. Get the lowest comparable property that's on the market, and quite simply, we discount that between 20 and 30%. And we call it the C and B effect, which is COVID and Brexit. And if we know it is a particularly unwelcoming, polite phrase, development, then we will take that down to 30%. So somebody says, right, there's one there for 100,000. If you're trying to sell that, in the relative immediate term, discount it immediately by 20%. If we know there are other issues, such as there's not many people have been paying their maintenance, it's in bad order, the golf course is closed, whatever it might be, we'll discount by another 10%. And the reason we do that, we've got to get to the commerciality of the deal of what we're doing. Everybody needs to get that. That's what values are about. And it's not missing anything out. It's not hope value. And that's why selling costs, particularly in Spain, come into play, because we'll give an example in a separate little video here on what's going on there. It's going to be between 13 and 16%. And very, if any discussion at all in terms of that cost. So that's where it's important to get you. So you may start off under the opinion, your hope value is it's 100 grand. It's actually about 75. Your selling costs on that will take the problem. You're most likely going to be netting 65. And it's getting a couple of these things in place. And that's why we bring it into the valuation side of what we're looking at, because we've got to know if you're looking to sell, it's bad enough because you've got a long haul here. Particularly in England, properties, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland as well, it's going, the domestic property market is pretty good and things are flying out the door. We were fortunate enough to sell our property recently, our home, because we're downsizing, kids gone and all that. And it went fairly quickly and the legal system's pretty good. Spain, it is a nightmare. Absolute nightmare right the way through. Again, the type of buyers that are in the market, they're chances, quite a few chances, giving you a bid, walking away, and this sort of thing. So again, MURCIA, difficult area. We understand the various nuances of it. And as I say, our valuation method there is lowest things being marketed, less 20 to 30% subject to the development, then your selling costs of 13 to 16%. So that's MURCIA. Here we're talking about the property values in the Costa del Sol, which is quite a vibrant market, but it's many, many parts to it. I mentioned in the main webinar we did here that you've got places down below Estepona, you've got Marbella itself, which can be stunning, and then it has the local market as well. Then you've got some developments are built up on the hills and the mountains, and you've got some that are further up the coast that claim to be Marbella, etc., etc., etc. So many, many different features applied to properties in the Costa del Sol, not least location suddenly becomes, that's more and more relevant in terms of this market. But again, it is a completely varied market. And again, we're bringing up the elephant in the room, as is of today's date, Brexit and COVID are undoubtedly having a drag on the value. We use a measure about 20% from the lowest market value that we can find online. It's so dependent on the market type and the property type, like I say. The property types, you can go up into Marbella Hills and there's £20 million houses down to Manilva, where we've seen places that were initially bought for €250,000, now selling for 60,000. Huge range, massive range. And again, the valuation process in our head is local knowledge, because that takes you so far, just with the local estate agents, although you wouldn't trust them as far as you can throw them. But we don't just look for one, we search the market, find out all the comparables we can, looking at the square meters, because the Spanish are quite big on that, the value per square meter, including any balconies and the like, which is always a strange one, but we do that. Go into that depth, but then quite frankly, we discount by 20% to say the rate. If you need to realize this now, that's what you've got to do. So that's what's going on there. Selling costs are prohibitive in Spain, and that's on a separate mini video during this work we're doing here. And they're non-negotiable. There's capital gains tax. We don't deal in any capital gains tax because we're dealing in negative equity in the main. Then we get quite a few people in that area saying, what are the chances of the recovery of in-property values, say, across the board? And again, the property market as a whole in Spain is pretty good, but again, it depends on the type of property. Using my example of Manilva, it'll only go so far, it'll never go back to wherever it was. So it's incremental rather than anything material. If it goes up 10% from 60,000, it's still only 66,000, not 250,000. So there'll be incremental recovery. Generally, the market seems to be in a good condition, but again, it's down to the property type and location. The market must be where it nearly needs to be, because we are finding that more and more Spanish nationals are coming into the holiday home market in terms of the properties that are available. So back to my Duquesa Harbour and around there, there's a bank repossession there, and they're selling the units at 90,000, aiming at the Spanish market and the locals rather than, I'm sure they're welcome, tourists and Brits and Irish alike, but they're aiming that at the Spanish market. So that's got to be, I think, a pretty good baseline, because they know their stuff. They know how to market to them. They know what it's worth. They know what it's worth when they buy, and sell it for suits. So that sort of gives us a good baseline. So anything like that gives us a great indicator. But unfortunately, we only see, in terms of what we deal with, our side of the business, which isn't always the prettiest side, that the market will continue to bump along the bottom. You will get these beautiful white palaces and all that sort of carry on. But where we are at the minute, and what we deal with, the nitty gritty, the volume properties, if you like, that at best will bump along the bottom until we get some sort of definitive answers in terms of COVID and Brexit. Unfortunately, that's going to take a lot of time. So that's how we see the Costa del Sol. Not very technical, but there are so many moving parts. If somebody's looking for this to be a video where we explain exactly what's happening in terms of everything, we'll be here till Christmas after next. So property values in the Costa del Sol even. Here we're looking at the selling costs in Spain explained, and everyone would have gone straight to the figures and they're 13%. But what I want to do is give you a bit of a breakdown. And because say we were selling a property in England and it was 13%, we'd be negotiating like crazy to get the best price. But in terms of Spain, most are non-negotiable, and a couple you wouldn't want to negotiate because you want to make sure the job's done correctly. So if we go through these selling costs, estate agents in Spain charge 5% plus VAT, EVA taxes called out there. Okay, and little or no movement. It's a bit like the original Marks and Spencers or Poundland. How much is it? You know what you're going to be charged. It's going to be 5% plus EVA. Non-residence tax is a moot point, but it's charged and deducted at source from the sales proceeds. As you go through this, there is a chance of recovery. You need to do a lot of pre-prep work on this and really get all of your affairs in order. A number of people have tried it and in the end basically give up on it. In our experience with the selling properties, because it's so difficult, and if you are one if there's one element your financial affairs in Spain, say for instance you haven't declared a rentals and the local council found that out, you're not getting your non-residence tax deduction back. Solicitors and/or if a notary is involved, charge 2% typically plus IVA. If this is the one cost you don't scrimp on, because as people will know if they've seen some of my Bell & Company webinars, which is our sister company, I'm not a fan of solicitors. And in Spain, we've kissed all the frogs you can find, especially in the Costa del Sol. And we have our team, which has been developed over years, that perform. They don't have what we call mañaneritis, and they're not cheap, but they do the job. Do not scrimp on this cost. And again, I wouldn't negotiate that. Very often with the legal process, other associated costs come in, such as local issues, deeds and everything else. Undoubtedly, a lot of people wouldn't have known about when they signed up for the. So there's usually a 1% cost kicking around somewhere. If it's not there, they'll find it and you'll get charged it. And you can push back all you like, but it's not going to get you a sale through. And again, that's plus IVA. Then I put moving costs, because what I've done, I've not included that in the 13%. So if you're moving stuff back to the UK or whatever you're doing, make sure you've got that accounted for in there. So your estate agent's cost plus your non-residents plus solicitors plus associated costs, etc., at the minimum will be 13%, and that's from the net price we calculate. So if you've got a property at 200,000 and say it's discounted by 20% to make sure it sells, you're down to 160. Then you've got 13% of that, which is about 20 odd grand. You're down to 140 when you thought it was possibly worth 20,000. The reason we're saying this is we work on this net realization value, because your headline figure isn't obviously what you're going to end up in your bank or going to your bank in terms of paying off your mortgage. And we're finding more and more as people get frustrated as they learn it's very difficult to sell a property, especially something on, say, on roughly parity, i.e. mortgages 200, the value is 200. That example I just gave you there suddenly creates a negative equity situation of about 60 grand. So it's important to sharpen the pencil, get these points all in. Otherwise, it's a very rude awakening or a bloody big bill. So make sure whenever you're looking at selling your place in Spain, if you are thinking of, get every cost quoted to within an inch of its life and do your own calculations. Selling costs in Spain, explained. Now, we can labour on, we can be very negative and everything else, right? It's easy to grab negativity. This isn't what this is about. What we're bringing is a massive dose of realism. We deal with Spain every single day, not just our solicitors, we deal with banks, and we're talking to our job is to work out how they're thinking, what's going on, what's in their mind, how does it compare with how we think in terms of the UK and Ireland. So we're forever asking questions. We're always taking findings. Not that you could do a report on it, but it keeps us abreast, we think, of what's going on, because that's what we get paid for, to sort these sort of problems out, this sort of crap that went on. So the general thing is Brexit is going to take 5 to 10 years to properly unravel, with all the legal stuff, government bodies couldn't organise a very good drink in a brewery. Going to take for him, and that backdrop of uncertainty is brutal. And that's not us just saying it. We have friends out there, friends in business. So we have a friend who's the best mortgage broker in today's world. We have solicitors, we have valuers, and they are genuinely beside themselves about Brexit. They think for them, it's the most ludicrous thing to do. And that's not a political statement. That's a commercial statement. Banks are literally, excuse my French, crapping themselves about Brexit because they just don't know where it's going to go, what it's going to do. So the overall thing is, for the Spanish property market, Brexit is not good. If we have an aging population, and obviously they've got to be cared for, Spain doesn't want that bill. We're not in the EU. Spain doesn't want that bill, so it's going to have all these sort of knock-ons. And it's whether then we go into this point here, holiday homes for the future, do we really want them? We have the ability now to travel anywhere in the world at relatively cheap prices, COVID reliant. But and Brexit just sort of keeps nipping at that concept, I could live in Spain, I could live in Spain, you'd be fine and say in 5 years' time, well, we're not welcome. Okay, as long as we've got the situation, the 90-day restriction now in place and stuff like that. And again, it's not negative, it's realistic. It's knowing what's going on out there. So Brexit is having an underlying, nasty, niggling, never going away issue. So that's going to be there. It's going to take those 5 to 10 years to pan out, whatever the half-wits in the civil service do in terms of sorting this out. There's no rush for those guys. It's a bit like turkeys voting at Christmas. So it's undoubtedly a drag. How much of a drag, we find out over time, but it's having an effect, undoubtedly. Mark Stucklin, far more intelligent man than me in terms of property price in Spain. So he says it's not as yet had an effect. To my mind, should be down, say, in a year's time. When I'm wrong, it will have an effect as we go forward. We know COVID-19 is not going to go away. At this moment in time, here on the 16th of September, we seem to have it controlled, not gripped, but it's not going away. And wherever variants go, it's having a longer term effect in terms of our mindset, our ability to travel, our desire to travel. So it's going to be around. It's they're trying to find that horrible phrase, the new normal, whatever that might bloody mean, and it's going to be there again. It's not. I don't think touch wood. It's not anything like Brexit and that effect, but it's undoubtedly had an effect on us. And people are more wary in terms of long-term commitments. If people are saying, right, we'll see you, hopefully catch you in Spain before Christmas, we hope so. Whereas before it was like, yeah, put me down, I'll get the flights now and do that. Now you can, I'll book the flights and I hope to be there, but we just don't know. And property, as we all know, isn't a short-term commitment. You've got to go all in there. If you're going to buy a place, you've got to be there regularly. We've got clients haven't obviously been there for 18 months plus now, and some of them it's 2 years plus. And if you went in the summer of 2019, that might have been your last visit. Here we are in autumn 2021. That's can you base a long-term commitment on that? And if with these two things, if you've got that backdrop and that uncertainty and that drag on that market, and not us, but that negativity, you've got to sell. And if you've got to sell, then you're going to get a certain type of buyer. When those certain type of buyers come into the market and say they get a place for 2/3 the value, say there's a place on for €200,000 and it sells for, say, €135,000, that 135,000 becomes a new benchmark of that local area because it's registered land registry in Spain. And so consequently, that has an effect, a cumulative effect down with properties around it. Yeah, you might get some increase because they say, well, that's a full sale, but it has that effect. And we saw it particularly in the last recession. And say we've been working since the last recession in terms of what we do. So like I said, we don't go anywhere. We're in for everything for the long run. Excuse me. But with some of the things we talked in about other valuations in terms of we're discounting lowest available market information by 20% to sell now because that's what's going on. Then we talked extensively about Spain, but now we're going to look at Cypriot property values. So CYPRUS, 4 hours away. I'm due there, hopefully, COVID line in a couple of weeks. I'd like to get out there and find out what's going on the ground. Haven't been able to go there obviously for the COVID period. And it's a very different market in every sense. And you've got quite a complex, out of control situation. Two very defined markets in Cyprus, locals and tourists. Tourists all around the coast, locals more inland, getting the right prices. But what it is, Cyprus has many small defined markets where just the name allows local valuers to really pin a value and know where they are, because you have many different things on that. We refer to it in here as the Wild West. And if you could have title deeds, as we know, are an issue in Cyprus, and this has a massive effect on the market in every sense. And it's very, like we've referred to there, very small, defined in its nature. And the massive thing that everybody do is make sure you get the right localized advice. And if you want help with that, by the way, and we're not selling anything, right? We've got a very, very good agent in Paphos, and we've got a very, very good agent in the Limassol area. And we can get those things out there. And these guys, we found along the way, because again, it's the Wild West, so finding people you can actually implicitly trust is a huge thing in any foreign market, not just Cyprus. Again, we get those two markets, the pre-2009, so the volume developments, if you like, and then there were, no, call a spade a spade. You've got the slightly better quality stuff built post 2012, and that was on the back of the government getting their act together, getting their acts cleaned up as well, or so they thought, in terms of the IMF giving them some money. Then you've got a lot of money in from foreign countries such as Russia and the like, and you've got some fancy developments. Limassol is not everyone's cup of tea, and long. But it's not. They've done a good job. It looks vastly improved. Is a polite phrase. Sometimes a bit chavvy, but it's there and it looks better. So you've got the two very definitive times and periods. The massive thing that the elephant in the room in respect to property values is the title deed problems that continue to persist. Now, the Cypriot government should have resolved this back in 2015, and here we are 6 years later, where we still have this huge issue, and everybody is at their work, is the phrase in Northern Ireland. By that I mean the bank, strange enough, they speak with forked tongue, potentially the old developer, the council, anybody that can get in their arm in here. And it gets us to a situation where you see shop windows that say property for sale with own deeds in capitals. And it's every single deal in what we do here is the same. In that they're all there. We're fortunate that we're commercial enough and been around the block, and we know what we're doing, coupled with our legal team in Cyprus, who are pretty brutal and don't miss anybody. And that's what you need to have. But trying to get values is so hard. In Spain, you can take a lowest value because there'll be quite a few properties in that area. At Cyprus, you've got that little niche area, wherever it is, and each and every one will have a different problem. So we had a property that should have been okay, but it was in the middle of development and didn't have a right of way out from anywhere. So again, it's the land registry is, if anyone's watching in Cyprus, I don't mean to offend you, it's not you, but the system is a shambles on a good day. And problems just abound every time. Sometimes stuff's not registered. Developers, like I said, have got the hand out. They see as a money-making opportunity, and we have to negotiate right the way through this. And all of these are huge, plus the COVID and Brexit situation. Cyprus is a beautiful island in what it's got there, but some of the stock is aging quite quickly in terms of quality build. And this is where you need the niche, I've called it there, the niche localized advice. And if you need an agent, you need to confirm values. If you're working with us, sometimes very often we ask you to go and sort that out in terms with them, because that's part of the process. And it's very, very important. You need to be able to trust them, but you also need to make sure you've got a reference, if you like, with these people. And it's not what you know, but who you know. That's the key, absolute key out there. We've kissed many frogs to get to where we are. We don't know everything. We know something. We don't know everything, but we have a lot of contacts there, and it's very important that we establish the correct value if we can here, because it's a massive effect of trying to extricate yourself if you've got a dodgy Swiss franc mortgage and that's got its own problems. Then if you've got the value as a moving feast and you don't know where it's going to be, you can't plan for anything here. So it's very, very important you do your research and get the right advice. And undoubtedly, it's still a huge buyer's market because, again, it attracts a certain type of buyer. If you've got title problems, to all intents and purposes, you're dealing with a cash buyer who will take a view, and they will discount like crazy to get them to a place where they're comfortable, because they need to make sure if it goes wrong, they can get themselves out of that situation and not suffer too much financially. And all that impacts on the volume. This is a well-trodden path in terms of the problems in Cyprus that we're not afraid to keep talking about, because until it changes, it will forever exist. And if you're buying one of the properties, particularly in Cyprus here, with this backdrop, make sure you've covered all bases as well, because they're, like we say, it's full of risks. If you're trying to sell in Cyprus, I'd say this anyway, come to us first if you would. Even if you're just look at the options first before you do it, because trying to get that baseline and the actual amount you're going to realise from a property sale is very, very important. We did a little bit, and when we talked about Spain, we talked about the selling costs in Spain, which are pretty prohibitive. Cyprus, they're not so bad. You've got your agents who can be talked to. You've got legal costs that are okay, but it still flips back to how clean or otherwise is the title. So you can think you've got a lovely property, you sell it, and our lovely barrister solicitor is going to sell it for you at a fixed price. Once he goes into the case and there's rights of way, there's a developer, there's da-di-da-di-da, suddenly you go from basic selling costs into litigation. Some solicitors out there, let's be polite here, enjoy that, and suddenly it doesn't become about selling the property, it becomes about how do you get out of that litigation battle. And we've helped a few clients on that, because a few people they've had the wool pulled over their eyes, it's a polite phrase, and the solicitors needed turning in terms of one syllables and go away, and we've dealt with and put the matter to bed. You've also got the if you do make a profit in Cyprus, then you've got capital gains tax to pay there, but we are typically dealing with cases that undoubtedly there's going to be some sort of loss. So as yet, we've not seen a capital gains tax issue. But selling costs in Cyprus aren't too savage, but they're still there, need to be accounted for if you are selling. So that's how you deal with that. A couple of little bits about us. So D'Amelia, Molly, and a couple of the other marketing guys here get together a monthly newsletter. And yes, it's a promo for us, but it does keep everyone up to speed in terms of what's going on, some of the settlements we're achieving. We also rely extensively on real video testimonials, which kindly some clients can give us, because it's about trust. We get that. But if you're not subscribed to that, there's a link there that you can go on to and subscribe and get that. And it just introduced here. That one there's got the beautiful Natalie down at the bottom right-hand corner. Excuse me, screwing my eyes up. That's Natalie, who deals with a lot of our cases in Cyprus and Spain in terms of settlement, fluent in Spanish. Not so fluent in Greek, but still we get them sorted there. And it keeps, we try to make it light rather than be, if you've got a problem property, it's problem property, okay? We are not in any way trying to pee on your chips here. We're trying to say, right, here's the situation here. We're keeping you up to speed. That one talks about loan sales, because loan sales are going on in the world where banks have had enough of this sort of, hard work it is for this debt. Some of this debt, you miss a payment, they've got a payment. It's in default, technically, your loan, because it's in negative equity, and they get problems with their own central banks. So they are offloaded. So there's an article on that one by me. So it just gives you an insight as to what's going on. We just settled an agreement, with a loan sale, a vulture fund, in Spain there, literally this morning. The details I'm not sure of, but the client's chuffed to blazes because it's done and away. Little bit about us. I'm going to give you a couple of videos here, right? So, this is so you know a little bit about us in terms of the humanity side. We love you as clients. It costs money. Okay, we do that. But a couple of other bits so you get to know us a bit more. We do an event every year for the NSPCC. It's called the Power of Four. I stupidly do it at my age, where we're running and yomping. That's the old army way of walking, for 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. Last year we raised 10,000. This year we hope to be in excess of 20,000. And it's we do a little bit to put back. NSPCC, the most deserving charity. I think there's a little video clip going up here looking all the young fit ones. Hopefully I'm not in it, because that might put you off your dinner. But it's what we do, and we try to be that inclusive, and we try to build our team into that, making sure you've got to do your bit as well. Then we've got an ever expanding team. And I, as always say, as long as you always pick the people that are younger and more beautiful than you, then every day is a pleasure. And there's a little bit of a video of us adding to the team as we go along. We're now at about 25. Most likely need another couple of members in the team across the group by the end of the month. And it's what we do. So we must be doing something right. And we're here for the long term in terms of what we do. And generally, so this stuff we're doing here is we're trying to impart knowledge. Hopefully, with my delivery, amateurish as it is, you get the feeling that we mean what we do, and we've given a number of we're trying to give it as an informative thing. So that's why we break these down. So if you just want to know about the selling costs, hopefully there's something there that can help. If you want to know about values, it might be a bit woolly, but it starts to give you a bit of an insight how it works there. And we're with people. That's why we do that. Some people like them. Quite a few views. Some have got 5,000 plus views, which always amaze me. So they're there for a reason. It's for to give the content, if you like, hopefully show as well from our side that we know what we're doing. We've been doing it in foreign property markets now for about 8 years, and we've done work in Hungary, Canada, New Zealand, Bulgaria, usual suspects, Poland. A lot of different countries, but Spain and Cyprus are our mainstay because that's the go-to place for Brits and Irish. So that's a bit about us. A couple of videos there. Hopefully they caught your eye. I'm going to sort of come to an end here, right? We're talking about what can happen if people work on hope value versus reality. Very many estate agents talk to us and say, right, I have a number of clients that should come to you, but they won't accept the value on their property. Okay. So you may have a mortgage, say, of €150,000, and quite a few people are deciding they're not going to sell it for €1 less. Okay, even though the value on in that resort, that development, that urbanisation suggests it's only 110,000. And so this is where you see the weather pictures in windows of estate agents, and they're looking at greater values. You look at really that price? Sure. So this incident here was a gentleman and his wife came to us. She was driving the bus here. She was in charge of the case, and they had a property in a resort near Casares in the Costa del Sol, and they thought it was worth about 170. Okay, so when clients come to us, they say, right, we think it's worth 170. What is the basis of your valuation? And it could be anything from a conversation at midnight after 3 bottles of wine through to, I think that's what's going on, that's what we reckon. And really more informative than that. They also had a mortgage with Halifax Bank, who consequently sold their loan to Sabadell. And so these clients thought there was a €75,000 issue, which they said they could manage and everything else. That's okay, right? But they decided they wanted to get rid of it. If it came to it, they were going to sell, but they hadn't accounted for the selling costs. And we did a bit of an exercise then to show them actually what their situation was, because we needed two things. We needed commerciality and we needed reality, which are very important when you're thinking what you're in for. We're not obviously here buying £2 of tomatoes. These are material amounts of money, so you've got to get the facts right. The actual issue wasn't 175 shortfall negative equity. We estimated if they went through the process and sold it, it was going to be 120,000 plus. At which point the good lady in this case jumped in because she was the one in control of everything. So what we were looking at, so we were going to look at the resort. I think this was a 2-bed townhouse, and we found one very similar, slightly better, and that was on the market at 148,000 and had been there for 3, I think, or 4 months, and not a viewer. So it's 148,000, but hadn't sold. So it's not 148,000. We then, in simple terms, said to the client, right, you've got to apply here the COVID and Brexit discount that we're applying here. If you're going to do this now and you were going to sell it, that will be at least 20%. And in this instance, because of the location, nearer 25, but go with a 20%. So if you discount our 148 by 20%, maths on the top, it's about 120,000. Then you've got your selling cost on that 120,000. That net price is going to go away, and that would have taken us down to about 105,000. So they would have realised, netted after everything, after discounting to get rid of it, and after all the selling costs, etc., €105,000. They had a mortgage of 225. So very, very important to go right the way through the commerciality and how it actually works here, because if this client had gone down this process of selling this, we took a completely different process, which we're going to explain in a minute, in terms of solutions. They could have set off down to think, all right, okay, it's 170, got the agent round. The agent would have nodded his off the cap, yeah, we put it on the market 170. And they actually then sold it for the price we're talking there, or most likely nearer 130, possibly 120-ish. Big difference. Then the selling costs. So their misplaced hope value would have cost them another 45,000. And it's amazing how quickly it runs up. That's before you get the price, the selling pressure from the sharks that are in market to buy this. If you're selling at the minute, basically you've got to sell. It's almost like a shark can smell the blood. Let's get round there, give them a silly bid, hook them in, take them down the track, knock them again at the end in terms of price. We've seen it any number of times. It happened particularly in the last recession, and whilst we might not be in a recession, the property markets we deal in, particularly in Spain, in MURCIA and Costa del Sol and Cyprus, that is definitely the case. Get these figures right. Get these figures right. Now, we've talked a lot about how values can have a massive effect in terms of the financial position of the client, which is stating the obvious, right? And very often you get a situation where a value problem takes into negative equity. So this slide and this bit we're going to talk here is about value problems that can cause negative equity, but we have solutions, okay? And this is a big shout on our part saying we have solutions, okay? Now, if we'd said this 8 years ago when we first started, that wouldn't have been shouted. We have 8 years experience. I have personally, grey hair on the thatch would give you this indication, over 30 years experience dealing with debt problems, any financial problem, right? We can look at and we can find best solutions. And in terms of this work that we do here, we've created a product, if you like, which if we wrote it down, wouldn't really mean a lot. It's a lot of it's experience, a lot of it's contacts, a lot of it is pressure, how we can flip it round from you to the banks. And so it's something that we built up with the, it's our intellectual property, if you like, but we have these solutions. Now, the first line I put on this slide, and I would say this anyway, it's vital to get third-party representations. If it's not us, get somebody else that knows what they're doing. I employ you, get references, etc., because there are some sharks out there. Now, the reason you need third-party representation is for no other reason than that they can call out when the banks and or legal teams on the other side give you any amount of BS that they will. Okay, they will say they can't do anything for you and da and get aggressive, everything else. We cut to the chase. We say we don't care if you say we can't do it. We have experience, we have examples with all your banks. This is what we're doing. Okay, and it's very hard from a backdrop trying to deal with, and it's not a xenophobic or racist comment, trying to deal with a foreign bank is hard enough. So there's a language thing, but it's not, it's the nuances that go in with the language side. We're also keeping ourselves continually up to date in any sort of backdrop. So today, for instance, literally today, the team in Spain and our team in Leeds have secured a deal for a client in respect of a negative equity position for a loan that was sold to a vulture fund, which vulture funds, if they get your loan, make it a whole different ballgame and not in a good way. So we have to keep abreast. So now we've got the details of that loan shark, that was the wrong phrase, vulture fund, and we will be looking at how they conduct themselves and building up our knowledge and our intellectual property. Every single market, no matter what it is, be it, so it said there, Spain and Cyprus very different. In Spain, it's very different. Tenerife, okay, very different. Cyprus is just a completely different, and it's Greek Cyprus. We do very little Turkish Cyprus, but you do have work we've done in Turkey. So everyone is different, but we have them covered, right? Because we have in a minute, I'm going to give you the solutions and how we do them, right? What we're finding more and more, and COVID's brought this to a fore, which doesn't give me any pride in saying that, but what we're finding is if people need to sell now, it's very difficult, literally, just to sell it. Even you're not giving it away, but if you've got to sell it, you've got to massively discount it. And we're finding that in terms of the work we do, we can repackage that property. If you've got little or no or minus negative equity, we can get those properties away. There's a cost, but we can get them away, and it can end nightmares. There was a lady recently. She thought she was about 25,000 plus equity. She wasn't, and then suddenly she would have very quickly flipped into about a £35,000 situation, negative. We were able to sort it out. I'm not going to quote you the fees, but we were able to sort it out for a lot less than 35. So you could sell, as we often say, but whether you're able to or anytime soon, because of the uncertainty that we all face at the moment, is another matter. And then I've put there or, right? So when we go to work in a country, we've done it everywhere we work. We do a real loads of groundwork first. And we work out what their legal processes are, what their financial processes are, and what their jurisdictional strengths are or otherwise. And going through those, no bank or financial institution likes cross-jurisdictional issues. They don't really like chasing you in the UK. They will if they have to. What they typically do is revert to a loan sale, because vulture funds don't care. They'll go to any country, anywhere to recover money. The clue's in the name. Financials, we've got to work on the standards that they work on. So, for instance, it's flipped in Spain, how they do things. The bank used to give them massive financial support. Now they're charging them, if you like, for default situations, and that's causing them real problems. So it's something they have to sort out. And then legal problems, we have our great legal teams, and we're very strong commercially in terms of our input as to what can and can't be done. And it's a mix in terms of our legal one. For instance, in Spain, there's an element of the 1135 Civil Act. Okay, mad as it is, but there are provisions in there that protect people. It won't win a legal case, but it's any number of points that build up for us to be able to say, right, okay, we need to come to a solution here, and whatever it takes, we're getting this property back to you. We can do it the nice way, we can do it the hard way, and all of these things we've built up. So within reason, wherever the issue is, be it in the world, in Ireland, we use it extensively, in Northern Ireland where we are here, same principles, but it's our intellectual property, how we do it, how we build it up. And that's not being protective. It's saying every case is different. We have to get it in, we find out what the situation is. But if you're looking to sell, this solution, an approach could work for you, and in a lot quicker timescale. Every lender is different, and they're always changing their criteria. So we can work with some banks where we say, right, the best situation is if we get you this property back and all get on with their lives, that's best, because we'll be putting pressure on them to do some sort of deal with us, because the legal processes in, for instance, the Estepona court are taking 4 years. So we play on that. Or we find that La Caixa and Bankia are now merging in Spain, and they want to look at an actual physical property sale before they can do a deal. We turn that around as well. Santander go hot and cold, UCI as they're called in Spain. In terms of the banks in Cyprus, they are slow at best, not always the sharpest tools in the box, and very frustrating for clients. But we can work title deeds into it, because if they want the property back, they need clean title, and they need an element of our help. So everything is different, and you don't always need a sale to get rid of a property and or eradicate negative equity. It costs, it's legal, like I said, it's a financial process, it's a legal process, a jurisdictional process, and we bring them all together. So there is a cost, but there are solutions. That's what, we could come in and go, oh, everything's awful, everything's awful, everything's awful. It's not great, but we're looking for solutions. We're not continually looking for problems. The reason we talk about COVID, Brexit, everything else that's gone on here is so we get the context of what it's doing to markets and values. This isn't a series of tables going, if you go down to cell C83, you'll find your value. It doesn't work like that. We all know properties are far more complex, and especially in far away markets, that makes it a real big problem. So we always have solutions for negative equity, whatever they may be. Even if you're being if a property's been repossessed and you're being chased in the UK, we actually helped a family, a poor family whose sister died, and she didn't tell them, but she had a place in Spain. It got repossessed, and she had a €110,000 charge on a house. we dealt with that. It's stuff that we can do. But it's extending into, right, we can help you. If you're trying to sell a problematic property, even if you've got some value in it, but you want rid of it, we can look to see how that's done. And our sales, our solutions are always quicker than sales. That's a lot about us. You've got to put a bit about us, right, in terms of what we do. But whatever you do, get third-party representation, because it gives you the ability for them to act like a filter, if you like. So that's a bit of a rambling carry on about valuation. It's what we do to get to the nub of the problem. Very often this is the one problem in life. Life's been great, pay my mortgage off at home, got my pension, everything's great, kids are gone, daddy down, but we still got this one issue. And that's what we're always good at. We don't judge anybody, we don't care, right? If we cut to the chase, we look at the problems, we commercialize the problem sensibly, forget your hope values and ludicrous thoughts, I'd like to keep it, we love it, all that sort of stuff. That ain't going to happen in terms of what we do. It's finality we're trying to bring to what we do. So I'd like to thank you for your time for watching this. Hopefully it's of some use. It's a bit rambling because it's a strange subject, particularly, but I felt it was right that we put some out there in terms of values, and it helps hopefully give a bit of focus on what you should do. Should you sell, not sell? And you know, how do I deal with negative effect? How would I deal with the fact I've got no debt? So we're here. There's all our contacts there. You work away. The team are ready here. Our expanding team, you've seen a lovely video, are here to help. That's what we do. As a group, we have 350 plus clients. So we must be doing something right, but I always work on the premise that we're big enough to be able to take on creditors, but we're always small enough to make sure we can deal with individual clients' requests and requirements. We're not we never will be a company that have thousands of clients. It doesn't suit our DNA, if you like. So that's us. Thanks for your time to watching us. Excuse the rambling, but hopefully we've got the message across. And whatever you're doing, have a great day and be careful. Good luck. Bye. Cheers.